All right, as we see folks coming in, want to welcome you. My name is Joe Swimmer. I'm the Executive Director at Episcopal Parish Network. We're pleased to have you with us today on this beautiful Thursday here in Washington, D.C. to talk about securing a financial advisor. We are joined by our friends from CapTrust who are going to walk us through their expertise in this area of issuing an RFP and securing that help that you need for your parish financial administration. We have some interesting other digital workshops that are coming up on June the 3rd. There'll be one on marketing, but more importantly for this group on June the 13th, we have a session on endowments, why you need an endowment that will be running that day, June the 13th at 3 o'clock. So please join us and do mark your calendars for February 25th through 28th. In Kansas City next year. For anyone who has for the annual conference, and for anyone who is wondering, this will be recorded and we will be sending out a recording with the PowerPoint at the end. So without any further ado for me, I'm going to hand it off to Heather and she will be leading us into the conversation. Thanks so much, Heather.
Thanks, Joe. We're happy to be here with you today, and we're really grateful for everyone's time. We will be paying attention to the chat and anticipate getting to your questions at the end, but if there's anything that's burning important that comes up in the chat, certainly we will address that as we go. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, which is focused on best practices for conducting an advisor request for proposal, or RFP. My name is Heather Shanahan. I'm a senior director with the Endowments and Foundations team here at CapTrust. CapTrust is a national advisory firm with over 525 endowment and foundation clients, representing more than $22 billion in assets. Combined with our retirement plan and wealth clients, we advise on nearly $800 billion in assets. As a firm, we've responded to nearly 4,000 advisor RFPs since 2002 from a multitude of organizations ranging from startups, nonprofits, religious organizations, government entities, public and private corporations, higher education institutions, and Fortune 500 companies for their defined contribution, defined benefit, non-qualified retirement plans, and non-qualified retirement plans, in addition to corporate cash, operating funds, foundations and endowments, and either a single or multiple plan format with assets ranging from less than $1 million to over $6 billion. On a normal year, we collectively respond to over 25,000 questions. The purpose of our discussion today is to walk through a step-by-step process on how to conduct an advisor request for RFP or for proposal or RFP, and share some best practices that we've learned based on our experience. Requests for proposals are extremely relevant in the endowment and foundation world when a board or committee are considering hiring or replacing an advisor. At the conclusion of today's webinar, our goal is to help attendees have a starting point and a clear destination. Joining me today are David Hanson and Bill Paxton, many of whom, I guess you guys have met at the annual conference in Houston earlier this year. Dave Hanson has a legal background and is a financial advisor and principal based in Lexington, Virginia. He advises individuals and families and endowments and foundations in the areas of investment management and financial planning. In a personal capacity, he serves as the chairman of the Investment Committee of his local parish, which manages assets over $5 million, and is the president of the trustees of his local diocese, which oversees an investment pool of over $20 million. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bill Paxton is a financial advisor and principal based in Lynchburg, Virginia. His advisory clientele includes endowments and foundations, individuals and families, and institutional investors. Like Dave, he also has a legal background. He's active in community affairs, having served in various capacities on multiple nonprofit boards, and is currently the treasurer and trustee of his church. So, today, I will share my screen and we will get rolling. All right. So Best practices for conducting an RFP. So for our agenda today, we're going to talk about activities, the trends, benefits, things that we're seeing. And then the second thing that we're going to talk about today is a step-by-step process and plan to help you ensure a sound process. All three of us have a lot of experience, some great stories to share, maybe some not so great stories to share of things that we've seen that would best be avoided. And again, we will be paying attention to the chat if you've got questions along the way. So certainly encourage your participation. So again, thank you everybody for being here. So let's talk first, Bill and Dave, about why finance and investment committees typically conduct an RFP. So what are the things that set this off? What are the catalysts? And then what are the benefits of doing that? So Bill, why don't you just start us off on some of the bullet points here?
Sure. So, there are a number of catalysts that that result in organizations doing an RFP. We've listed some of these here. Changes in a current advisor. In some cases, there is no advisor. Increased complexity of fiduciary responsibility, such as ESG, general due diligence, fee and service validation, and an understanding of the market, and also just again related to fiduciary responsibility, the need for a formal process of selection and review and evaluation of your service providers. Investment performance a lot of times is a driver, and then very often the catalyst is a major gift received by the organization.
Yeah, Bill, I think I recall from Houston this year at the annual conference, we bumped into a number of folks who had had changes at their current advisors, and they were going to be exploring RFPs, major gifts, which sort of was a catalyst for folks to get going to and figure out what they needed to do. And then a third thing, a category that came up really was sort of new people coming onto the committee that were, maybe it had been a number of years since anybody had taken a look at things, and they wanted to have a look around and see what the marketplace was like. So I remember hearing that from folks in Houston this year.
I can't understate the volume of RFP activity that we see come through. I represent one business line within Cap Trust, but literally right before I hopped on this call, there was an appointment set for an RFP discussion with an organization, and the chairman of the investment committee had just switched over. And so, here we go. So yeah. Certainly that's common. We saw a really significant influx in RFP activity following all the market volatility of 2022 as well, where a lot of committees said, ouch, either they weren't happy with what happened performance-wise, or they felt like their advisor didn't communicate well, or they wanted to explore the opportunity to shift to an outsourced CIO platform because they realized that their committee maybe had some finite capacity, and they wanted to be able to either have a partner that was responsive and quick to make changes as needed, or at least had access to more research and more information than they did as a committee. So certainly those tend to be catalysts and things that we see in terms of changes and opportunities there.
There might be one more thing that pops into my mind, which is sometimes parishes or dioceses have been in a certain situation for a long time, and they actually outgrow those situations. And the current provider they're with may have reporting systems that are much more retail oriented than institutionally oriented, and there's a big difference. And so that can also, I've seen that as a reason for people to start looking around.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, I think the ESG, I don't know, we tend more towards socially responsible investing versus ESG strategies with our religious services clients. But, seeking that alignment between investment strategy And the mission of the organization is often a prompt. And then also given growth in the portfolio in general, if the current advisor doesn't have experience with alternative investment strategies, then that's another thing that comes up often too, is that they want to make a change and explore those ways to diversify their portfolio. Taking a look at benefits. Dave, what pops into your mind when we talk about the benefits of running an RFP?
I think there are all a whole range there that are listed. I sort of put them all under the general bucket of getting better and trying, wherever you are, you can get better at what you're doing. And in particular, there can be, the IPS, an opportunity to really review and get help on your IPS. Sometimes we've seen situations where it's just internally managed and, investment committee members or whatever kind of wake up to the fiduciary risk involved. Everybody on these committees, they are fiduciaries, and getting a, professional third-party advisor to help with things really helps with that issue. And yeah, I think you can just get better over that process. There's a certain aspect occasionally of just good corporate hygiene in terms of regularly looking at these things. I know in some instances, people have gone a decade or something without looking at their advisor. They run an RFP process and then they decide, hey, we still like our advisor, we'll keep you. That happens all the time.
Absolutely. I mean, there's definitely a due diligence component to this. Best practices would typically say every 5 to 7 years. Certainly there are organizations that go longer. I shared with both of you, we have a client that joined us back in the fall that had not updated their spending policy or investment policy statement since 1999. That might be a little bit too long, and so, these are good exercises for sure. And I think, there's an element of kind of keeping everybody honest too, that helps check the box on that as well.
Yep.
Bill, anything to add in terms of what you see for the benefits or experiences that you've had with clients?
No, I mean, I think y'all hit on the key points, is that the fifth, the next to the bottom, the benchmarking information, again, just reiterating kind of what you all have said, that a lot of times you kind of, it's helpful to kind of know how how you stand or how you compare to your peers out there in terms of the services you're getting, the fees you're paying, et cetera. So, if you haven't done that in a while, this is an exercise that really gives you a ton of information to see where you stand.
Mm-hmm. I think it's fair to say that not all organizations are created equal. And so it really depends also on what you're interested in that partnership. I mean, is it strictly an investment management conversation? Are you looking for a partner that will provide fiduciary and governance education to your committee? Are you looking for a partner that will, provide best practice content and strategy around, engaging the members of your parish and how you help grow your endowment? So, not every organization covers all the things that might be meaningful for you. So it's important to take a look at that as well, really craft what you need and then, seek the partner that will best provide that for you.
One additional thing that comes to mind on all this is that some advisors are much more passive in their role and others can be much more proactive. And in my experience, given the nature of parish committees and the hugely varying levels of skill and time, limited time, varying skills, that a really good proactive outside advisor partner can provide a lot of continuity to that investment committee.
Absolutely. Well, we were curious to kind of hear from everyone who's joining us today to learn a little bit about where you are in your journey in terms of conducting an RFP, both what's your experience level And then if you are considering conducting an RFP, what's driving that? So we actually have a poll. So I would love for everyone to participate in that. And so Joe's going to come back on and join us, and pop that up for everybody to participate in here in a second.
Okay, I now have it up, and folks, you are our test group for running a poll. Hold on one second. I'm trying to make sure that it is up and running. And let's see.
I'll stop sharing for a second. How about that? That might
Yeah,
help.
that's a good idea.
Loading. Hold on one second. Goodness, we tested this beforehand, and now it is not working the way that we would have thought.
Well, we can certainly move on and use the chat feature.
I am
instead of the
sorry.
poll
I am
feature.
sorry, folks. We tested this before.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I do not know. This is why we should have asked Betsy to do it for us. But we're going to do this again in the future. Thank you all for being patient with us. We have just had our first fail at a poll. I know that you all are interested in this work, and we'll go back to Heather and Dave, and I will go off audio. Thank you guys for your patience. Sorry about that.
No worries.
I mean, we can really achieve exactly the same results with the two slides that have the two questions up here. This is really for folks in the audience to just sort of reflect on a little bit as to, you know, it's kind of nice to know what the group of you is thinking and where different folks are, but really and truly the questions themselves get the job done here.
And Dave, a good way to do that might be just for folks to comment in the chat, if you would, on the questions.
Yeah.
So that might be a good workaround for our poll fail. But thank you guys for being patient.
No worries.
Yep, good try, good try. We'll get it.
All right.
So,
Yeah. Do you want to, so diving in on our questions here for our poll, if you could use the chat feature and respond, what experience do you have with conducting an RFP, advisor RFP? So none, I've done it before, or I plan to conduct an RFP within the next 8 to 12 months. So or you could just type in the chat real quickly. It'd be interesting to kind of see the range of experience here. Like we've got some coming up here in the next everywhere from 4 months to a year, some who are right in the thick of it right now. Yeah.
A lot of folks are going to do one in the next 6 to 12 months, it looks like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great to see that there are folks up there that this is particularly relevant for. So yeah, that's great.
Okay. So let's go to our next question then. Why are you considering conducting an RFP? So is this a benchmarking? I can't talk today, not helpful. Is this a benchmarking exercise, as we discussed earlier, addressing potential advisor conflicts, new board leadership, market volatility and performance concerns, no current advisor, or some other reason? So if you could add in the chat why you are considering conducting an RFP, that would also be interesting for everybody to see. Give everybody a minute for that. Performance popping in first.
Oh, disappointing performance.
Yeah, board leadership, major gap. Well, you just all the things we've talked about. Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's consistent with kind of our experience in this. So, yeah. Get all services through one point of contact. Yes. Yes, changes in advisor ownership.
Hmm.
There's a big one out there that happened over the past year that has impacted a range of
Yeah.
all kinds of organizations, including the Episcopal community.
Mhm.
So, well,
All right,
that's
well, that's
good.
a pretty representative sample that certainly echoes some of the major reasons that we identified as well.
Yep.
So let's dig in on step by step. If you're thinking about doing this, or if you're in the middle of doing this, maybe there's also some takeaways, especially when we get to the actual point of you're bringing in your potential advisor candidates. What are some things to consider? So let's start it with the steps here: preparing, implementation, and then decision making. And I'm going to call on Bill for a deeper dive on our point one of preparation. So let's go ahead and get started on that, Bill.
All right, great. So I'll walk you through the next few slides on this kind of first on the preparation phase of the process. And the first order of business really is to determine the purpose of the RFP and to identify key stakeholders. Determine who needs to be involved, who is in charge, and who is the primary contact on your end of the process. Will this RFP be run by your finance committee, a subcommittee of finance, an ad hoc committee that has been named? You need to, of course, have a chairperson who has ownership of the process, and importantly, you also need to have a separate secretary, a scrivener. Very important to document each step of the process here. Next, you want to identify the needs of the organization and the goal, I would say goals, plural, of the process. What are you trying to solve for? This seems simple, but it's really one of the more important elements of a successful RFP, is being clear on what your goals are and to have consensus around those goals. Next, choose a review / scoring system or process. You want to be intentional on the front end about the criteria that are really most important to your parish or to your diocese, and an objective scoring system is really important, critical element of all that. Next, you want to agree on a timeline, and this is not only for the respondents to the RFP, but also for your internal deliberations as well. In our experience, a lot of RFP processes do not stay on track because of an underestimation of the time required. And what we generally recommend is that 90 days is probably a minimum timetable for most RFPs. For example, you want to give respondents 3 to 4 weeks to respond to the questionnaire. You want to leave yourselves, your committee, plenty of time to evaluate responses, and also built into that part of the process, you probably need to include the possibility of requests back to the respondents for clarifications on some of their answers. Then you want to schedule your finals presentations 2 to 3 or even 4 weeks after notifying the finalists that they've advanced to the final rounds. So again, you very important that you build in plenty of time to the total process. And then finally, in this stage, you want to reach consensus, inform your key stakeholders where you are, and proceed. And then Heather, next slide.
And before maybe,
Yeah.
I definitely want to echo
Sure.
Bill's comments there on this timeline thing. This is a big project. It's actually, it's a real and significant project for, a parish investment committee or for a diocesan kind of entity. And if you're used to just meeting quarterly to, review investment results, my sense is that 90 days is absolutely kind of what you need, and that there will be some extra meetings involved. And that will be outside that this ad hoc committee kind of will need to schedule. And we don't have a slide that has a nice little timeline for all the various things, which, maybe we can get together next time. But it's definitely, there's an internal drill here that is not insignificant. And then there's the external drill as well. In 90 days, in on the parish and the diocese that I'm involved with, especially at the diocese level, we feel like we have bandwidth for one big project a year. And last year it happened to be SRI ESG considerations and how do we think about that stuff. And that was our big project. And similarly, my sense is that, this could be like the big project for a committee in a given year, to
Yeah.
do this.
For
The
sure.
big project.
And I think a lot of times committees, you're herding cats to get everybody together to come up with dates that everybody can participate in the review process, but you probably know what those dates are pretty far down the road. And I think we're always surprised when we are alerted that we've made it to finals, how frequently the final presentations are the following week. And we're trying to scramble from, often different parts of the country. And so just from a basic professional courtesy standpoint, when you get to that place, if you can give your finalists a couple weeks notice, I think that's ideal. And I think that's often overlooked because you've done so much work just trying to figure out internally what your availability is. So that's a good thing to plan, kind of begin with the end in mind. And then back into your
Work
day.
backwards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Good. All right. So next, you'll need to begin gathering the information that you're going to need to prepare the RFP questionnaire. And so what are some of the key pieces of information you'll want to compile? First, your investment policy statement. This should be included in the RFP, so it's going to be shared with the respondents. Some organizations don't have an IPS, investment policy statement. So you may either decide to hit the pause button and back up and actually work on developing an investment policy statement, or what we see a lot of times is you make assistance or guidance in developing an IPS a part of the service that you're asking the advisor or consultant to provide. Next, spending policy, and same as the investment policy statement. This is going to be shared with the respondents, important piece of information that they will need to know. Very often the spending policy is contained within the IPS, but again, sort of same thing. If you don't have spending policy, you want to make sure that that is either developed before you send your RFP out, or you're going to request assistance in developing that policy. Quarterly review information, and here what we're talking about is really including in the RFP what your expectations are on reporting from the advisor or consultant that is selected. So these are things like, of course, performance, but also as relates to investments, current portfolio positioning, investment changes that have been made since the last report, and maybe the rationale for those changes, market commentary and outlook. all of these things that sort of put the investment results and decisions that are made in the endowment into context.
Hey, Bill, can I mention one thing here too that
Yeah.
comes to my mind a lot,
Yeah.
which is that, in our investment committee and even at the diocese, there's a wide variety of sort of digital fluency amongst members on these committees. And so there's sort of a decision to make about how digital all this information is and how hard copy it all is. And just you can do a lot worse than just get a ring binder and get this stuff in a ring binder. And that way, actually, at the parish level and even at the diocesan level, when it comes to talking to your vestry or whatever, if all this stuff is in a ring binder, that's just helpful for everything being together in one place.
Yeah, good suggestion. So next, going down the list, portfolio holdings, and here specific current holdings of an endowment are generally not shared as part of the RFP. But if you have, for example, multiple funds or asset pools that have different uses or different investment objectives, that's an important piece of information that does need to be shared in the RFP so the respondents know. That's going to just help them kind of direct their responses to what's important to you. And it also is going to help them price the proposed services appropriately. And then these last two items, fee information and current agreements. Again, these are not normally shared as part of the IFP, not normally shared with the respondents, but your committee, your selection committee is going to need to, just to be well informed, you want to have that information because of course that's going to play into the decision on who you end up selecting. Any other comments or questions? We'll go to this last slide in this part of the presentation.
There's a comment in the chat from Scott about restrictions on different funds and endowments, which typically we see codified in your investment policy statement. But if not, depending on how things are crafted, then certainly it's important to make sure that that is included and communicated too.
Yeah, absolutely. More information, better for the respondents.
I think I went too far, didn't I?
There we go.
Go backwards. Are you
How
good?
about that? Yep.
That one. Yep.
We're
Okay.
good there. All right. So the final piece of the preparation phase is, kind of formulating the questions. What do you want to learn from the respondents? And we kind of think of 9 topics or basic categories of content that the RFP should address. The first, general firm overview, ownership of the advisory firms that are responding and the history of that firm, bios of the principals, high level menu of services that the firm provides. Next, client experience, and here we're talking about an overview of the respondents' clientele, number of clients, assets under advisement with clients like you, representative client list, and of course, very important, references. Next, legal and compliance, current status as a registered investment advisor or broker-dealer, any outstanding and recent legal proceedings or complaints against the advisor. You of course want to ask these questions, but also as a part of this piece, you want to request a copy of the advisor's Form ADV, which is a filing submitted annually to the Securities and Exchange Commission. And then also here you'd want a sample advisory or consulting agreement. If you end up selecting that advisor or consultant, what does their advisory agreement look like? Next, fiduciary status and services. What is the scope of services and the pricing provided? And again, you do want to directly ask that if the respondent is a fiduciary and if that status is recognized in their advisory or consulting agreement. Investment consulting services, again, scope of services, reporting. You'd want to request a sample quarterly report. What is that going to look like? What are their research capabilities, a performance history of the strategy or strategies that they are proposing for your funds. And just, I guess, one caution on performance, if you are looking to hire the advisor as an outsourced chief investment officer, can be very hard to get apples and apples comparisons. So you do want to make sure that you're getting competitive returns, but anyway, just be aware that performance, a lot of times you may not be getting apples and apples information, but a sample performance report would be key. Do they provide committee or trustee education and training? Differentiators, what makes the respondent organization unique? Fees and for services provided, and then lastly, information security and data security. Address any potential risks associated with cyber attacks and their processes and procedures.
Hey, Bill, can I jump in on one
Yeah.
thing here, which is that this is a big list of items, and I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll mention this further a couple times, but CapTrust has a template document for issuing RFPs, which sort of contain these categories in a way that you know gives you a starting point in the document. And if anybody's interested in that document, you can reach out to us and we will provide that, as well as Joe had said he's going to make a copy of this deck available on the thing tomorrow. And Bill, had you also mentioned Form ADV for other advisors?
Yes.
It's like, ask for one of those.
That's right. Yeah.
Because we had talked about, you kind of want to see in those Form ADVs, which, you know, there's helpful regulatory disclosures, and you can see if there's any big lawsuits or anything against your potential provider.
I think that's the question in the chat. ADV, which stands for Uniform Application for Investment Advisor Registration, but it's never written out that way. It's more commonly ADV.
ADV, yeah.
Yeah, Form ADV. So there are a couple interesting questions in the chat here. I don't know if we should diverge. I can, there's a question about sort of, can churches invest in anything that they want, or are they, should I come back to that at the end? We spent, our diocese spent a fair amount of time on that last year. Should we wait maybe, or should I? I don't know.
If you can address it quickly, why don't you hop on that? We're talking
I
about.
will. All right. Yeah, I would say that in our explorations last year, we would say what we learned was that the National Episcopal Church has a fair amount of guidance and recommendations and what they call encouragement, and it relates to policy areas and investment approaches. But it is phrased in terms of encouragement and awareness, as opposed to our friends in the Catholic Church, of which CapTrust works with a lot of Catholic service entities, which has a very tight top-down exclusionary approach. And so I would say, you know, it's for each diocese and parish to wrestle with their their understanding of their discern, favorite word in the Episcopal community, kind of engage in discernment around how their fiduciary duties call them to invest those funds. And that, as I guess Bob Clark is saying here, DFMS has some no buy list rules. Those can be very helpful, but I think each church is given some latitude to kind of wrestle with and decide where they are. It's definitely a process and a journey for all parishes to kind of come to terms with this and decide where they are and to actually develop consensus around where they are, because it's becoming politicized, and it's so
Okay.
All right. I will
hope that's okay as a
Kick
digression.
All
keep,
right.
Dave, keep going. You
Let's
can do
hop
the
on
next
to
section.
implementation.
Yeah.
My turn?
Yes.
Your
Okay.
turn.
So, right. So Bill just kind of talked about the first half of this: internal, gather your information, get your people together, understand what's going on. And this begins to, are we on the determine and finalize the response structure? Maybe there's one side previous to this. There we go.
There we go.
So, your document that you will send out to your potential advisor candidates will generally have these categories in which other things live. But this is sort of the broad headings. It's pretty self-evident. An introduction, instructions, and information, which will contain timelines, overviews, which tell about yourself, questions. We'll come to that. There's often a piece, there's a little two-step dance, which we'll talk about at the end, where people who get an RFP are given an opportunity to ask questions, and then the committee collects those questions, answers them, and then often will distribute the answers to those questions to all the potential respondents. But this is a good sort of framework for your document that goes out to people. Heather, next slide, maybe. Yes, and so there's quite a kind of a list of things here, some of which may or may not be applicable depending on the scale and size of your entity and where you are. I mean, non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality clauses, maybe the main thing, and I think Heather, who has so much experience in this area, mentioned this. One thing you don't want is you don't want potential bidders calling your committee members on the side and doing a little lobbying and trying to get an inside track on things. And so you do want to be clear with people that there's direct channels for communication on this stuff. And procurement forms, if that's more related to kind of governmental entities. There are some questions around hard copy or electronic, depending upon where the organization is in terms of its level of whatever, but I would say most people are getting stuff out electronically these days. Content limitations, kind of a good point here, and I think Heather's seen a lot of this, where it's like, tell them it's 10 pages maximum. You do not want a kitchen sink approach where some advisor is going to send you 100 pages of stuff. And pricing can be separate, and contracts that can go two ways. Your entity probably does not have its own investment services agreement. It might, but the advisors that you might pick probably do. And depending on your situation there, you want to cover that one way or the other. Next slide, maybe. Identify the recipients. So, good question. What is an appropriate number here? And this is one thing to keep in mind, is that the committee needs to be reviewing all the answers that come in. And I think we would say, as a general rule of thumb, 4 to 7 might be good. Heather, you kind of feel like that's a ballpark number, right?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, but we've also participated in RFP responses where we've been told later that there were over 20 firms that were that received the RFP. So, but again, I think it's just, buyer beware. If you ask for 20 firms to participate, you should be expected to read all 20 responses. So it's just sort of,
Yeah, what are you up
you're willing
for?
to make a career out of this or not. So, yeah, sometimes smaller is better.
Yep, and should you include the incumbent? Good question. I would say it depends. Many people, if you're engaged in more of it, you're not unhappy with your incumbent and they haven't done something that's made you really annoyed, or their systems are just inadequate for where you are now. It can be fine and nice and a professional courtesy to include the incumbent. I know our diocese conducted an RFP a few years ago, and the incumbent was included, and they kept the incumbent because it was more of a benchmarking exercise. So that's kind of, it depends. One thing to keep in mind here is conflict of interest issues. And in our diocese, on our trustees, half the trustees are investment advisors like us, and we all think that we could do better than the incumbent. But our diocese, probably like your diocese and other organizations, have conflict of interest policies that effectively kind of preclude your being a bidder. There's all kinds of exceptions for disclosure and whatnot, and maybe getting waivers, but that just gets, if your standard is kind of avoiding even the appearance of impropriety, which is a standard kind of legal construct here, it's hard for you to be on the committee and also put in a bid. I don't know if Bill or Heather, you want to add anything to that? As tempting as it is.
Yeah, no, I can add to that and share that a lot of our clients, and interestingly, a lot of our Catholic Church clients, for whatever reason, have that language in their investment policy statement that really clearly defines the conflict of interest, that committee members may not participate in an RFP process. So sometimes we see it that, the firm will participate, but the advisor will recuse themselves. I think that's one workaround, but I think it's something to consider as a committee of how you want to frame that to just avoid conflict or appearance of conflict.
Yeah, just be aware of it. Yeah. And then this sources thing, I think there are about 50 people on the call or something. And so you all have your networks of people on your trustees, and your networks are going to be a very good place to source good potential candidates for advisors. Most committees will know the people that are relevant. But if you can do Google searches and consult industry publications. I would say the networking thing, in my experience, is the main technique at the moment. Bill or Heather, do you have anything else on that?
I think it's just it's important to solicit feedback from advisors or for advisors that have institutional asset experience, because that's what this is. And it's slightly different. There are different expectations in terms of reporting and management. So, just being thoughtful about those decisions is important.
Yeah. Okay. So keeping time in mind, next slide. Distribute, intent to bid, and Q&A. This is where this two-step process that I was referring to kind of comes in. You've got your list of 4 to 7 advisors. You distribute it to them. It has all this timeline information. One thing in that document should say, we want you to tell us within 7 to 10 days if you're going to bid on this and if you have any questions. So that's this feedback piece, and that's intent to bid. And the Q&A thing, and then summarize the questions in one document. Technically you could just answer the one-offs to the particular advisors. If you only get one, it may or not, it's kind of nice to summarize and distribute to the group all the questions and the answers, just so that there's sort of uniformity across the knowledge base on that. But that's sort of a stylistic consideration, I guess. So maybe next slide. This goes to Heather, to section 3 here, which is when the rubber meets the road. And, it's like, okay, you've got the stuff. Now what do you do?
Well, thanks, Dave. The first bullet point seems obvious, and yet maybe not. Communicate back that you've received the information, especially if it's submitted electronically. It's important to confirm that you have it, to make sure that things weren't snagged somewhere. Try not to get overwhelmed. Do allow yourself enough time for review and getting back together as a group, especially if you did opt for the 20 RFP response route here. It's a lot to consider. Follow your process. Know that it's okay to ask follow-up questions. If you get an RFP response and you're not quite sure what someone says and you wanted, or what they're saying, you want to get clarification before you decide whether or not they're fit to bring in for a finals presentation, ask questions. It's certainly not out of the realm of normal. And then communicate internally and try to come up with a decision quickly, but again, thoughtfully. This isn't something to be rushed for the sake of a timeline. Coordinate schedules and finals meeting. Communicate to that. We don't often hear if we aren't selected for finals, we don't usually hear that we aren't in consideration until after the decision is made with who the advisor firm will be. So I think this is a nice step, from the seat that we sit in, but that's not often how things work. Review everyone's schedules. We talked about that kind of as maybe an upfront consideration as well, and coordinate schedule presentations with finalists. One thing that I would share here is give yourself buffer time. Sometimes it's tough if your committee, we say, all right, June 15th is the date that we're going to all commit to on our calendars. We're going to knock this all out in one day. Realize that sometimes these things go longer than anticipated, especially if you've got a firm in front of you and you really like what they're saying, and maybe you've got some additional questions. So give yourself some buffer time if things go long. Also, I would share best practice would be work this out so you don't have firms crossing each other in the hall, especially if you're in a smaller community. That's so awkward, hey, you're next. So maybe space things out a little bit. Or, we've even been in situations more in a university setting where, we're led in one door as the people in front of us are led out another door so that you're not seeing each other. So just kind of a courtesy thing, not a have to have, but a nice thing to have. Communicate expectations, topics to address, agenda. I think it's always helpful for an advisor coming in to have some feedback about what's really important for the committee to hear. We often ask that question, and certainly we'll ask it when we get in the room. What do you really want us to focus on? Because we will have submitted to you a slide deck of probably anywhere from 20 to 30 or so slides. So, what do you really want us to drill down on, especially if you're only giving us 30 minutes? So that's important feedback. Do check references. I'm always surprised when that doesn't happen. So get the feedback from existing clients. Conduct a site visit. We would love for you to come visit us, in any of our offices. I don't know how often that happens, but if you've got time, then certainly do that. Make a decision and then document. That's so important. Your committees are volunteer committees by design, and they will turn over. Typically you have term limits and people roll off. And we often find a situation where we see this a lot with private foundations, especially where, you get 10 years down the road and nobody has any idea why the decisions were made, how you got to this place, what the backstory is, if there was no written record. So make sure that you document that information. And, it's just best practices, certainly.
Yeah. Hey, Heather, one thing that also occurs to me here is that in this committee meeting, I think from the committee's perspective, it can be really helpful to try to get a feel for the experience, what it's like if you are working with this advisor, and understand how often they're going to meet with you. What do their reporting materials look like? And try to ask these firms to give them a feel for the experience of being clients. And I feel like that's actually been a differentiator for CapTrust in a lot of environments, as having been very good at helping clients understand how good that experience has been, and what it is.
Good feedback for sure. All right.
Okay. Summary. As a fiduciary, I think Joe's about to get the hook here on us, but keep your fiduciary hat on. I think the main point here is to have a good process, follow it, document. A lot of the decision-making entities in this process, if you're ad hoc, you will have to report your decision up as a recommendation to the vestry or to a full board and say, here's what we did, here's what we considered, here's how we scored this stuff, this is our recommendation, and ask for a blessing. So that goes to Heather's point about all the documentation and yeah, reinforcing previous decisions. And yeah, as a result of this process, find an advisor that's going to be a bigger and better fit for you. So I think that takes us to Q&A with just a couple minutes left, and we are delighted to take any questions that are top of people's minds on issues that will sort of really help them where they are.
Got a question on performance-based fees, which would, in my experience, you know, don't usually see that outside of the alternative asset or hedge fund realm, but you know, most of what we see for investment management is you know, fees just based on the value of the assets under advisement.
Yeah, I think the industry standard model is, I mean, in the old days, it was brokerage firms that had fees on transactions and fees on funds. If you're at an institutional level, it's much more about fees, annual fees based on assets under management, with 1% being kind of a starting point, and then fees going down materially as asset pools increase in sizes. If you get to, once you're over $20 million, fees can easily be down, you know, at 50 basis points or below. And of course, committees, I think this, you know, you need to monitor the expense levels of the investments that the committees, that the advisors are going to be using. That's an important ingredient and piece of the puzzle as well. But yeah, to Bill's point, the performance-based thing is usually about hedge funds, limited partnerships, and other private pools of capital that are paid both a percentage of assets under management and a performance fee. Anything else? How do you think about working with someone as an external advisor versus the ECF or the national church? I can take a little shot at that. I guess by external, you're meaning, you know, it's sort of within the family. If you're still with it, I mean, the Episcopal Church Foundation is it's an excellent outfit. It is very good people. I think they have, you know, I think I'm pretty familiar with their size, but I think it makes sense to talk to some that are outside the fold and also inside the fold. And because I think there's some different experiences and different kinds of platforms and reporting systems and really different investment menu options. So I would do both.
And Heather's responded to the question about a recording and also copies of the slides. And then also, I think, Dave, you mentioned if folks want a copy of an RFP template, I think they should contact Joe, and we'll get those to people, or I guess our contact information is at the end of the deck. They can contact us or contact Joe.
Yeah.
They want a copy of the RFP template.
Well, I guess, yeah, I think we have, it's 4 o'clock. Our time has come. I hope this has been helpful. We're delighted to try to provide this information. My personal sense has been that this is somewhat of a neglected area when it comes to advising committees and that. So we hope this is useful to you. And thank you for being part of this.
That's great, Dave. Thank you so
No,
much. Thank you,
right.
Heather. Thank you, Bill. We're grateful to you all. Just to reiterate, we will make the slides and the recording available tomorrow to everyone who registered. You'll get an email with a link to that, and they will reside on our website. So please know that that information is there. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Dave, for this great conversation. And we'll look forward to your session later this year on philanthropic giving and endowments, et cetera. The survey that's coming that we promised everyone. So, all right. Thanks,
Joe's getting
everyone.
ahead of it there.
Okay.
All right. Take good
Thank you,
care.
Joe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.